I guess my technical question is, as you potentially are looking into some of these areas that I think the overlay, I'm not an engineer, my perception, and members of the public perception that overlay is already coming off after only a couple of weeks. What ramifications does passing this notice of completion have on potential impacts of us going to the contractor potentially and saying that, maybe it didn't meet, and again, my words, not anybody else's, but meet the obligation of the contract?
Sure, thank you. Mental Dean, Public Works Manager. To answer that question, so if you recall correctly, that this road was done in two separate sections. There was an overlay portion and there was a pavement treatment portion. The portion that you're speaking of, that you see that there are still some punch list items that are outstanding, is the surface treatment portion of the work. The overlay portion of the work is complete. That's the 2-inch asphalt overlay. The staff has gone through, checked that. That work is complete. The striping is complete, but there's the surface treatment portion that still requires a bit of work. And before we bring the notice of completion for that portion, we will have all that work done.
Thank you, Menjo, for entertaining me on not remembering overlay versus surface treatment. So,
No problem.
okay. Thank you for answering that question.
Thank you. Any other questions in that regard? Do I have a motion?
Yeah, I'll move that we approve the 2022 overlay project, Auburn Folsom Road, Brook Road, Marvin Way, and Roby Drive notice of completion.
I'll second that.
Councilmember Stokely,
Yes.
Berlant,
Aye.
Riddell Harris. Aye. And Mayor Amara.
Yes, thank you very much. That passes. Item number 6, economic development grants per the Economic Development Commission granting policy. And that would be Jonathan.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, council members. On October 11th, the EDC met and evaluated the applications per the EDC granting policy. Based off their evaluation, EDC is recommending the approval of the 6 items that are listed here, 6 applicants. This concludes staff's report.
Thank you. I'll ask for questions, but I do want to say I'm familiar with some of these. These grants are very needed, and these people are very, very thrilled about this. But anyway, did you have a comment?
Indeed, I do, yes.
Want to state your name for the record,
What?
please?
Schmuck? No, Mike Holmes, yeah. So, we were very interested in this approval of economic development grants. And I noticed that there were quite a number of business improvement, event sponsorships, community enhancement grant applications. And I was concerned because my understanding was that one of the community event sponsorship applications was for the Auburn Veterans Day Parade Committee, which has a lot of expenses, including renting toilets and providing food for people at the end of the parade and a number of other things. And so the EDC did not approve any event sponsorships as far as I can tell. And so, the Veterans Day Parade is coming up on the 11th of November, which would be before the next council meeting. And I would like to request that maybe some reconsideration be done for that particular application.
Okay, I will have Jonathan speak to that. Would you speak to that? Can you speak to that?
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, council members. Jonathan Wright, Community and Economic Development Director. Under the EDC's policy, there's nothing that says that certain categories are going to be ranked and granted over other ones. The EDC met and at their discretion evaluated them based off the criteria. It was at their own approval that they went forward with the ones that they did. They did look at the event applications. I'm aware of that because it was part of the process, but they went ultimately with the business improvement grant and the one community enhancement grant. It was a decision made by the quorum of that body, and that's all I can speak to.
So
Thank-
I,
Thank you.
uh,
Go ahead.
thank you. I wasn't there because I was sitting in O'Reilly's parking lot with a dead battery. So I was not able to attend that meeting. But I know we've had previous conversations about how the money is, we would like to spend the money. And a lot of that has to do with new events. And we have one of the oldest veterans parades around. So that event is not a new or starting up event. So I'd imagine that that was part of the play. There's also rules around events having to do with raising money and payback for the money. And there's a lot, it's not quite as straightforward as just sponsorships. Sponsorships is what we understood that the city manager would be responsible for, similar to the Placer event or other types of things, that fireworks, things like that, that are just ongoing things that we like to participate in as a city, and not necessarily an economic development thing where we're trying to start up a new event. So that tends to be how we were looking at it. But again, I wasn't there. If we wanted to have more people, we could always bring it back and talk more about it.
So the money allocated for this is spent entirely. Is that correct?
That's incorrect. There's still, after everything's said and done, there'll be $3,738.68 left for future granting rounds, which the next one would be anticipated in February, March timeframe.
Okay.
And Mayor, if I may just interject real quick, keep in mind, there was almost 30 applications received, and based off the funding that they did have and the criteria that they went through, they were only able to give out or offer 6 grants as a recommendation to the county.
Right. Thank you. Is there any other discussion with council? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll just add first off, my comment to this every year is I don't think this should be a council decision. And so I really appreciate the work that the commission did to make that selection. So support what the commission has come up with. Of course, who's going to not want to support the Veterans Day Parade? But I think it falls back to what Jonathan said, which was the city manager has discretion and already supports the Chamber of Commerce through a number of sponsorships. And I think that's the more appropriate place. And the Chamber of Commerce and its board have the authority to determine which of their events are most important to receive those level of sponsorship. So I have no doubt that all of us will be out there to show our support. But for tonight's item and knowing that there's additional dollars for other future selections by that committee, I support what our commission has put together.
And I just want to reiterate that as well. You know, we have a process. They went through the process. And again, it's not that we don't support any of these events that came forward and wanted contributions, but certainly I support the way the commission proceeded. They followed the rules that they put forward that we wanted them to do. And that's the outcome. So did you have another additional?
Well, I
Statement?
wanted to point out again that this parade has been going on in Auburn since 1918, except for a couple of years during World War II. And it draws a lot of people into Auburn, which is why we wanted to apply for as a significant event. You know, those of you who have witnessed the parade know that there are 5, 6, 10,000 people who come to view the parade, and then we have a ceremony at the fairgrounds at the old Armory building there, and so and serve a lunch or snacks and so forth there. So I'm very disappointed that that has not been approved. And so
John, would it be, oh, sorry. Would it be possible, I mean, I'm assuming there's sponsorships, different sponsorships for the parade. Is that like, that's how I would assume this would be handled, is through the city sponsoring it or doing some kind of thing like that, and not an economic development commission thing. Is there a possibility of working with the Veterans Parade as a group to talk about that possibility of us supporting the parade in some way?
Sure. If they have some things that they'd like to bring in, we already provide a number of assistance to the Veterans Parade, a lot of in-kind
Can you-
types of things. So if they'd like to submit something, we'll entertain it.
Can you also come up with how much we are donating in kind, just so we have a sense of what that is for the parade?
Sure.
Because I know we did that with the Placer High School anniversary celebration.
Okay, Councilmember Lamb?
Yeah, I have a question because I feel like we're teeing this up that we don't support veterans or the parade.
No.
But are we not giving the Chamber of Commerce their own chunk of money to fund these type of parades? And I thought we specifically opened up, and I don't remember the exact name we gave it, but the large organizations, including the chamber, to be able to be eligible for up to $10,000. And so from, again, I
And
guess that's a question. Are they eligible for that pot of money? And since the parade is under their auspices, couldn't they determine under their discretion to use that money for this parade?
absolutely, they could.
Thank you.
Well, we have not asked the Chamber of Commerce to support the parade, other than for permits and that sort of thing. So the Chamber of Commerce does not provide funding for the toilets and other accoutrements that go on with that. And then the meeting that takes place at the Armory after the parade. So anyway, if the city is willing to consider a modest contribution outside of this program, we would certainly welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate that, and let us think about it. And again, not to minimize any event that comes forward, but even the all-class reunion, which brought in, thousands of people from out of town, they didn't receive any money either. But so in any case, I think that's something we should consider, because at least the Veterans Parade, because their annual, they do bring in a lot of people into our town. But
Sandy, I would remind everyone that we did give thousands of dollars worth of in-kind donations to the Placer.
we did give in kind, true.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
One of the biggest points, we do provide a lot of in-kind. As an example, shutting all the streets down and both the setup and the takedown do represent a lot. And while there's not a direct dollar check that we give to folks, I can tell you that shutting down all the streets, all of the equipment that we bring out there and everything represents a pretty good penny, including all the law enforcement and the fire personnel that support all that stuff. But we'll listen to them, and we'll also consider all the other stuff that we do too.
That would be good. Because we do support our veterans. That's very important. And we do support the parades that come through our town. So, okay. Do we have a motion then for item number 6, economic development grants?
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we approve the economic development grants per the EDC's granting policy.
Have a second?
Second.
Councilmember Spokely.
Yes.
Berlant.
Aye.
Riddell Harris.
Aye.
Mayor Amara.
Yes, thank you very much. That passes. We will move on to the public comment. This is the time provided so that the public may speak to the council on any not on the agenda. Please make your comments as brief as possible. The council cannot act on items not included on this agenda. However, the item will be automatically referred to staff. Council members also have the option to speak on any item not on this agenda at this time. Do I have anybody from city council that would like to make a public comment? Yes. Councilwoman Riddell Harris.
Thank you. I just wanted to remind everyone to vote because that's coming up soon. And I know it's easy to just forget things as how busy we all get, but I just wanted to thank everyone who's participating and making the democratic process possible, poll workers, everyone else who's out there. There's a lot of people working really hard right now, and none of this could be possible without all the volunteers and everyone that we have involved in our process. So thank you to all of them. I just wanted to let everyone know that Chief Spencer and I met with PCWA this morning to discuss the on-bill donation program for fire prevention projects, and it was a good conversation. I've worked in the public sector talking about bills for a long time, and bills are just a challenging thing to get things on. So there's a lot of IT projects and stuff involved. So we got to work through some of that. They also alerted us to some possible other funding sources that we haven't been tapping into that can be through PCWA. So it was a really helpful conversation. So that was great. And then my last thing is I wanted to say happy birthday to my daughter, Lena. She's turning 8 today. So I'm here instead of there. So I told her I'd say happy birthday.
Happy birthday to her. Anyone else? Okay,
Yes, Mike Holmes again. I just wanted to mention that there was an article in the Auburn Journal about the roundabout that has been proposed for Highway 49 and Moreland and that area. And the photograph that was in the Auburn Journal showed Highway 49 as going through the middle of Auburn, which it doesn't. So I don't know where that photograph came from. I guess it was contributed or from Caltrans, but Highway 49 does not come through the middle of Auburn any further anymore, and comes over Elm into where the Elmwood is, and then makes a left to go onto 49. So I just wanted to point that out, that when we did the streetscape project, we had to go to the legislature to get Highway 49 rerouted so it did not come through the middle of Auburn. And so that photograph that was in the Auburn Journal was incorrect. And so we'll see how the project goes as far as the roundabout. Thank you.
thank you very much. We have a public comment that'll be posted.
This public comment was received via email before this meeting by Miss April Maynard, in case she would like to make any side notes. I also have some pictures that accompany this public comment on the next page.
Just give us the 30-second version.
If you'd like to read it to us, that'd be.
Oh, not at all. I mean, I
Pictures
can't,
will tell 1,000 words.
right. I mean, if you wanted to go to the pictures, I just thought it was important because, I mean, there's always vandalism, there's always spray painting, but it just seems like the effort and the force that has been used recently for vandalism is actually kind of stunning. You know, the fact that especially the two on the bottom where that half wall kind of bench was completely pushed over. And I know it was a second attack on it because it happened a couple of weeks ago where it was kind of punched. And then that happened. And that's obviously someone, I think, using a vehicle and with not very much care for their own vehicle, let alone that short wall kind of bench thing. And then the other thing, it's not as obvious, but on Stan Padilla's piece that's under construction in the park, it may not look that remarkable, but I mean, you see the stack of rocks behind it that is like flush with the ground, with the pad, the concrete pad. And then you see on the one that's closer that you can see the rebar underneath it and the debris. I mean, these were epoxied. There was a hole drilled into the pad, rebar inserted in it covered with epoxy going through each rock that was drilled. And for someone, and I don't imagine there was a vehicle back there or equipment, physically to pull that out of the pad so that there's that gap there, disengaging the epoxy seal and actually bending the rebar over, that's some brute force. And that, I mean, I don't like the spray paint either, or all our pumpkins being smashed, but just the force that's being used on that, I just find alarming. And just a level above the basic tagging that happens all the time at the park that Public Works cleans up and then it happens again. So I just thought Public Works is so good at going out and cleaning things up that I think that maybe there's a lot of people who don't really realize that this is kind of getting amped up. So I just thought it was important to bring it to the public notice. I know the council members have found out through the ongoing communication within the city, but like I said, Public Works gets out there and clean. I mean, the first I heard about our pumpkins being smashed in the street Friday night was getting a picture of that pickup bed full of pumpkins. So, you know, which is, it was about $1,000 worth of stuff, but it's, you know, it's pumpkins, but I don't think it's a reputation we want in Auburn. And I would just hope that maybe there'd be some, I'm not an expert in this. I don't know how one fights vandalism in a city, but I would think that the more people who know about it and have eyes out and are alert and listen and engage. And I know that the POP unit or whatever it's called is coming on board, I think soon. And that I'm sure will be helpful. But I mean, I think it takes kind of the whole community to really just start being alert and protecting our city.
And I want to add that some of these things that are occurring take a lot of time. And so I think that's very true. If there's an awareness by everybody and we keep spreading the word that we need to go down there and be vigilant and keep an eye out and not be afraid to call our local police enforcement or talk to people and tell people that, you know, it takes a community, because this is really disappointing. And then we had it at the Veterans Garden not too long ago. It was just a horrific vandalism down there. So, you know, it's all, we do need to work together. This has to be brought to, you know, stopped. So thank you for.
Yeah. And so we have been talking about deterrence and reporting and cameras and all that, but I mean, it's, I'm more focused on the deterrence, because catching the people afterwards is good. But I mean, I know there's a lot of public works time that goes into dealing with all this all the time when more constructive things could be done.
Thank you.
I know that
Yes.
in my work, we did a lot of work with police departments about lighting and learning how to use lighting in order to deter some of these things. And I know School Park Preserve does not have that great of lighting. People tend to not do bad things in areas that are well lit.
We are
So-
working on all that, lighting, sprinklers, alarms. So we're doing cameras. So
I understand, but there's certain types of lighting that aren't just general lighting that you can get that
we'll
help with.
ask you when
So there might be, I know that Chief Canan is trained in it, so maybe we should make sure that they're looking at that and making sure that they're thinking it from that angle.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do I have any other public comment? Okay, seeing none. Public hearing. Okay, an ordinance to amend the Auburn Municipal Code sections, a lot of sections. I'll let Jonathan talk about that.
Oh, goodness, I was hoping you would. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, council members. Jonathan Wright, Community and Economic Development Director. First off, I'd actually like to introduce this gentleman to my left. This is Curtis Ryan, for those of you who've not met him. He is the interim, well, he's actually the contract building official for the city of Auburn. He took over after John May left. I have had zero complaints about his activity. I know he's been working his rear off to keep up on all the permitting and everything we have going, because our numbers are still above last year's, and we're, you know, constantly interacting with the public, and he's the new face. So I brought him here as a technical expert. So this is not entirely my realm of subject. So in case there's any questions that can be answered that deal with the technical aspect, I'm going to have him do that. But pursuant to Health and Safety Code, cities may adopt provisions of the California Building Standards Code with certain amendments, which are reasonably necessary to protect the health, wealth, and safety of the citizens in the jurisdiction because of local climate, geological, and topographical conditions, so long as that certain factual findings are made related to the need of the amendment. So if you look at the actual ordinance itself, you'll see that there are some exceptions in there that are taken specific to Auburn. We do this every 3 years. Our last adoption was in 2019. And so this is our latest update to our building code within our municipal code. So, Mayor?
Thank you. Would you like to speak, or just here to answer questions?
I'm here to answer any question.
Okay, do I have any questions from the city? Yes.
I just have one quick question and maybe you'll know the answer to this. Um, Isn't the Universal Building Code going through a code cycle update at the end of this year, beginning of next year? And if so, will this have to be done again to incorporate whatever changes are in that update?
If you're referring to the state's building codes,
Yeah.
the California building codes, that is what this is for, is the adoption of those new codes coming out in January 1.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Do you have any other questions?
Well, as exciting as this stuff is, I am a delegate for California on the International Code Council. So I have heard the pros and cons of all of these, and I'm glad that we are finally bringing them into California and then bringing them into the city of Auburn. So I don't have any questions.
Okay, I don't have any questions, so thank you very much.
This is date night too for him, so they're going out afterwards. So he appreciates you with the brevity. So
Thank you for coming. Do I have a motion? Or do a public comment? Anyone from the public? Thank you. Do I have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we conduct our first reading by title ordinance of all of the Auburn Municipal Code sections listed in the agenda packet, thereby adopting the 2022 editions of the California Building Standards Codes and Amendments.
I'll second.
Councilmember Spokely.
Yes.
Berlant.
Aye.
Riddell Harris. Aye. Mayor Amara.
Yes, thank you very much. Now we get on to council business. Placer County Economic Development Director. That'll be Gloria Stearns, who is the director for Placer County.
Mayor and council, as a way of introduction, Gloria came aboard just a couple months ago, and she's kind of taken the county by storm. She certainly has brought a very positive impact. The staff has met with her, and I know that she has been very active, not only representing the county, but also all of the jurisdictions here. Last week, she was at the Placer Valley 2022 workshop, and she really, I sat in on the session that she was moderating, and just the idea of the collaboration that can exist between placer counties in the cities are there, and we wanted to have Gloria come here tonight to not only introduce herself to the council and the community, but also to give a really quickie update on what's going on.
Great, thank you.
Gloria.
Thank you for that kind introduction, John. I hope I can live up to all of that. By the way, I come from city management backgrounds, from working in cities. So it's kind of fun to be back at a council meeting, having a night meeting and not having to go to the board during the day like we do at the county. So it kind of warms my heart to see all of the issues and everybody taking an interest. Plus, I just love your city. So the more that can be done to keep this city moving forward, I'm happy to see it, and I'm happy to see things moving forward. So thank you for all of your work here, and those of you who continue to show up and move your community forward. That's excellent. So I'm just going to start with one of my favorite definitions of economic development, and I know you all know what it is, but there might be people in the audience who don't. And the one that I like the most has the word intentional practice of improving a community's economic well-being and quality of life. And the critical success factor is just a slide that I had borrowed from the Board of Supervisors. They consider economic development to be one of their top priorities. So who does economic development all serve? Typically, you work with businesses and workforce, but we also tend to work with educational institutions. You might have just heard last week, there was the shovel breaking or the groundbreaking for the new CSU. So they're coming, and we're already working with them to find out how can we partner with them to start attracting businesses. They haven't even put the shovel in the ground, and we're already working on how do we work with them to create jobs after they're all up and running. So that's kind of where our brain is at. We're thinking a couple of decades out ahead already. And that's exciting to us, as well as the partnerships that are being formed with all of the educational institutions within Placer County. We work with local governments. It's been my pleasure to come and talk to all the different cities, the city managers, the towns, getting to know everybody and what their issues and concerns are, because we want you all to be fiscally sustainable. We want you all to be doing the best that you can and bringing the best for all of our residents across the county and in the cities. And we also work with nonprofits. There are things, as you know, that government just cannot do well or cost effectively. So it makes more sense for nonprofits to be doing them. So I meet with nonprofits to give them like little financial tune-ups and make sure that they're going to be around to keep doing their their business activities. This is just a brief list of the partners that I've met in the 5 months that I've been here. I didn't even list businesses and all of the different elected officials, but there's been a lot. And we can't do what we do at the county without the help of everybody else. And the partnerships and the collaboration is so important to what we do. That's the only way that we can be successful. This area has been studied and studied and studied. There's all kinds of reports that have been done. And the latest one has been the Tahoe Prosperity Partnership, but you might notice that one of the words that comes through a lot is prosperity. So again, everybody is looking for ways to intentionally build the betterment of their community, and which allows us to improve the quality of life through our law enforcement, our schools, our parks, whatever it is that our communities value. So this slide is actually one of my favorite slides, and this projection isn't quite showing you it, but on the background of this slide, there's usually the image of Placer County. And that's sort of how I think about the county. So there's a huge map on the wall of my office. And on the far right-hand side is the east end of the county. So we're going to start over there in Tahoe. And right now, when Tahoe is talking about is destination stewardship. So about 62% of their economy is based on tourism. And they're looking at ways to make it more sustainable. So that way they can maintain the high quality of the lake and the woods that they have around them. So they're working on educating people who visit as to ways to do it in a more sustainable way, leaving a lighter footprint on the environment there. They've also had a study that recommended economic diversity. They have all of their eggs in one basket right now. So if anything happened, if heaven forbid, a fire had moved through there and it devastated the tourism industry, that would really wipe them out because they're so dependent on that. So a study's been done looking at different recommendations for what can they do to diversify their economy. And some of the things they're looking at are like forestry management, watershed management, climate change issues, having scientists coming in there and taking advantage of some of the natural opportunities that we have there to do their research and to make recommendations and to study different things. They're also looking at healthcare expansions. Downtown revitalization is essential to a lot of the little communities up there, as well as the catalyst projects. And by catalyst projects, we just mean the ones that are so big that they're going to influence not just the parcel that they're on, but a lot of parcels in many other directions as well. In the center of the county, we have ag tourism. And I like to say it looks so simple with just 2 words, ag tourism. But it is not simple. So one of the things that we're doing to help facilitate ag tourism is we're going to be pursuing the Sustainable Agricultural Land Conservation Grant, which is a $500,000 planning opportunity. And we're going to tuck that into our general plan update. And what we're going to be looking at is what ag lands can we preserve in the area, as well as issues of how can we have better ag tourism, ag marketing, an ag ombudsman, ag housing. Addressing all sorts of issues of agriculture and working with the community on these issues. Before we can even apply for the grant, we have to hold several, not one, several public meetings. That's even before we're allowed to apply for the grant. That's how much public engagement is important to this process to get that grant. And I think that's going to be something that really will help solidify the commitment to agriculture in our community. Again, in the central part of our county, downtown revitalization has been a concern. You go to Colfax, everybody talks to me, Forest Hill, they all talk to me about downtown revitalization. And then we get down into the south or the western. I still am too new to know what we call it properly. But there's issues, there's a lot of what appears to be vacant land there. And there's a lot of plans that have been made. But I think we need to be looking at targeted recruitment. And remember when I mentioned intentional economic development? Be intentional about the companies that we select to come. What incentives are we going to use to try to bring in the right companies that will provide family supporting jobs for us, that will take advantage of some of the synergies with the educational institutions that will be in that area? So how do we do branding and marketing to appeal to some of those industries? I think we need to leverage the business and educational connections. I've talked about that many times already. Economic intensification. What I've heard from a lot of city managers is that they feel that their cities are landlocked. And when they become landlocked, they start to look at their revenue and say, okay, how do I continue to grow revenue? How do we continue to pay? Increasing healthcare costs, increasing pension costs. How do we make these things happen? And so by economic intensification, you need to look at every opportunity that you have for economic development and look at it just with a slightly different angle and say, how can we maximize the revenue from that? What are the jobs per acre that we're getting? Think about a big distribution warehouse that has just a few forklift drivers running around and unloaders running around versus having somebody that's doing manufacturing and maybe their headquarters come as well. So then you have corporate jobs as well as manufacturing jobs on a smaller footprint. That's being a little more thoughtful and intentional about your economic development. I've learned that the West Placer Waste Management Authority is looking to attract recycling businesses. They have a really interesting little factoid. A manufacturing plant expressed an interest in one of their waste stream items. And within 20 minutes, they were able to take that out of the waste stream and collect it, and it was going into the manufacturing process. That stuff is cool for so many reasons. It's better for our environment and it's better for business. That's win-win on a number of levels. So I'll help them all day long, as well as catalyst projects that are in the west or south area. So this is our work plan for the county. I'm not going to read to you, but there's a lot of stuff there. And we were just approved, we being the region, was just approved for a $5 million community Economic Resilience Fund grant. So we'll be knocking on your door to get everybody involved in the planning for that as well. So watch for that coming up. But this is just a boatload of work to do. And right now I'm only 50% staffed. So we're busy trying to hire. So anybody who's listening to this at home, check out the Placer County website and look at some of our 81 job openings that are sitting there. We have a film office. The best kept secret in Placer County is a film office, and that falls under economic development. We've had people like North Face, Toyota, Old Navy come and film, Ford, Honda. The biggest one was Apple. If you watch their latest product announcement, the Apple Watch that was just announced was filmed in Tahoe. So it's kind of exciting to see that. We had a feature film here, and they're applying for Sundance right now. So the economic impact, the reason that we do film office under economic development is their economic impact, and it really affects our hotels and TOT. So for example, I give you the example on the screen about a 50-person crew staying 3 nights, you get 150 hotel room nights. And usually they do a lot of their filming or shoots during the weekdays, and that's when our hotels need to have visitors the most. So that's what we consider our economic impact, that plus restaurants. We also talk to local businesses for doing things like hair. There's all kinds of opportunities that you wouldn't think about that go with film. Water trucks, because if they have a generator and it's fire season, we insist on a lot of times they have water trucks in case anything horrible might happen. So in 2021, our economic impact, looking at all of those hotel rooms and restaurants and things, our economic impact was just over $460,000. This year, as of September 15th, we're at 2.2 million and counting. That's 5 times more than what we did last year. So I think our film office is kind of rocking it this year. Here's just the visual in case you don't believe me. That's rocking it. What do we have going on in the future? We're looking at a film festival. We think that Placer County could have a film festival, and we think we want to have it in a couple of different cities. So we're going to be asking a bunch of people for participation, volunteers as we get this on. I'm going to come here and talk to your city about shutting down one of your streets and throwing a big party in the middle of your street and pulling everybody in to watch some feature films and some shorts. Some of those may have been made by people within our own community. We might need judges. So watch for all the opportunities to participate in 2023. Flix is a statewide organization where film liaisons help different film production crews to come and visit here. And so we're looking at hosting a Flix meeting in the area so we can take them on a tour. The more the film industry gets to know about us, that bigger that bar chart is going to be. And then last but not least, fam tours. So you bring people in here and you familiarize them with all the assets in our neighborhood. We know how beautiful this area is. We know the foothills are beautiful. We know Tahoe is beautiful. And we even know lower areas that are just beautiful too with our farm fields. You just look around. It's fantastic here. But with my small crew, we had to pivot when the mosquito fire hit. We did outreach to businesses. We were on it from the second day. And once we knew that it was going to be a little bit bigger than something you put out in one day. So we've been working with the businesses on helping them with all sorts of resources. It's still not a federal disaster yet, so it didn't open a lot of financial options to us, but we did call up all of our partners immediately. They opened hotlines and helplines, and we gave every resource that we could to businesses in the community. We continue to keep going back. We continue to keep working with them. We staff the local assistance center. And then also the most important part right now is we're working with the University of Nevada, Reno. There's a professor who did a study on the Caldor fire, on the economic impact of it. So he gave us a cost estimate of that one. We're also working with the Greater Sacramento Economic Council on this study. So we're going to be looking at where our smoke went, not just the fire. So that covered 6 counties that we know of. And so we're going to be trying to survey as many businesses as we can in the area to get the full economic impact. We also know that as a result of COVID, people have inflamed lungs. And with the inflamed lungs and the smoke, they ended up going to the ER a lot more than they would have normally. So there's economic impact costs on all of that. So we're trying to gather up the cost of all of this fire. And this wasn't a terribly huge fire by comparison to the ones that we had the year before, but it still had a huge impact. And what I'd like to do is get the number of this economic impact, this dollar figure, and I call it big X because I think it's going to be a big number. And what I'd like to do is give this report and this big X number to my board that I report to and let them look at any county policies that they may want to change. There's local policies that might want to change, like maybe the Forest Hill Fire Department didn't get enough bulldozer time. Maybe they wanted to get some more time, but they were always told it's too expensive. Well, the big X dollar amount is going to tell them maybe you should be spending some of that money. And I guarantee you the U.S. Forest Service is going to need to use that information to help them get some more leverage to do policies. If you talk to the foresters, they want to do certain things. They're just handicapped a lot of times by funds, and we all know how that is. But if we can use this report across the region to make things better, that's kind of our goal. So when we start releasing this survey, I'd like your help in just letting people know that it's coming. We're doing a partnership with the Greater Sacramento Economic Council, so that way the data will be confidential. By the time it gets to the professor, it will be aggregated. So that way we're not looking at any one business's financial information. A lot of times they get a little weirded out by that. I don't want to weird anybody out. But this is an important thing that we're doing, and we're going to need everybody's help within Placer County to get it. And I'm making new friends across 6 counties now. So I used a little Fred Flintstone thing here because I'm new. I'm only 50% staffed and there's things that I need. And I discovered that as I've been here. But if you've watched the Flintstones, you know that the little feet start moving before the car does. And that's kind of how I feel with Placer County Economic Development right now. Our little feet are moving, but I don't think our car is going as fast as we want it to be right now. So I asked our board for staffing, and I put up the little link there in case anybody wants to look at jobs again at Placer County. I also asked for a possible move to the Business Resource Center. So I love Auburn. I really do. I enjoy driving here every day, and I can't wait to move here someday. But we might move to our Business Resource Office, which is down in Rockland, but that way we can offer them better servicing and better customer service. So it would be staffed more frequently, as well as a CRM. So we're looking at a customer relationship management software. And that one we're kind of excited about because when I talked to our board about that, they said, well, it's great that you guys get that and we'll be able to keep track of customers and the economic impact that our different visits on the customers make. But they said, why don't you roll that out to other people too? We need to coordinate that among the whole region. Wouldn't it be great if we could all work together using some of the similar data? So that way Jonathan doesn't have to call us up or we have to call Jonathan up. We all just know because it's all in the computer system together. I think that would be cool stuff. So with that, I'm going to stop speaking. That's Placer Economic Development from all I know from 5 whole months of being here. So thank you for giving me some time.
Thank you very much. Excellent report. And do we have any questions from the City Council? Yes, Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Gloria. For our staff, just want to note that you're hiring, but your pay and your benefits are really bad. So it doesn't make sense for any of them to spend time to look at that. But Gloria, I want to ask you a question for our community here. We had a conversation when you came and spoke to the Chamber of Commerce Government Affairs about the perception that some cities have, including our own, related to past decisions of the county that essentially were competing against the cities. What is your take and what's your work to ensure that you're, as you even have said multiple times through this presentation, working with the cities, not economically competing against us?
Right. Thank you for that question. First of all, I think that's a weird concept that they are in competition. I don't understand that at all. That was new to me because I come largely from Milwaukee County, so the Midwest. We didn't have that at all. That wasn't a thing. And then my most recent job was in Monterey County. Again, not a thing. Our county economic development and our county worked with the different cities. So when I got here and I started hearing that, I was kind of perplexed, but it was great because I started to understand it really boiled down to revenue. So it boiled down to issues of that economic intensification. And I think there's ways that that cities can leverage my staff. So I'm on the verge of getting fully staffed. I'm going to guess by January, I should have all of my staff. We're available and paid by the county with that sad salary that you mentioned earlier and those bad benefits. I'm available to work with any city for free. So is any member of my staff. So we're happy to come out and talk to people about anything. It's kind of putting your money where your mouth is. And so we believe in working with the cities. I don't believe in competing. I believe that if the county does a development that's really close to a line, and if that upsets you, well, then I'll sit down with you and let's figure out some way to leverage that development and steal some of the funds right back, or leverage those funds. If the county builds a hotel, you build a really cool amphitheater here, and program it so that way it's everybody from that hotel walks over here and spends their money in your area. To me, it's more important that we all succeed and not compete. And I heard this concept too with like some of our wineries in our area, that they compete with each other. So I wrote on my board, I write a lot of things on my whiteboard, and I wrote the word co-opetition. So it's basically cooperate, but it's competition. And I don't think we need to compete against each other. I think we really need to collaborate, because you need to remember it's us against everybody else. And by us, I mean all of us within Placer County, the geography, not the government, but the geography. It's all of us against everybody else. How do we get the tourists to want to come here? How do we get people coming to visit our wineries? How do we get them to come and visit our sports events? How do we get them to come and visit all of the natural beauty that we have here? So you need to remember we have to leverage that and work together against everybody else. So I'm not your enemy. And I remind everybody that the county has a lot of new people. I'm new. There's a new community development director. We have a new acting CEO. She's been on the job for just 5 months, and they're going to be making a decision about CEO. I'm hoping sometime in November. So we'll have a new CEO. There's a new parks director at the county. So there's a lot of new people who don't understand or don't know this, that we're supposed to be enemies. So you're going to find a lot more people that are going to reach out to you and want to work with you instead.
Thank you. I agree. We're not supposed to be enemies. And so your focus and your comments are very refreshing. So thank you, Gloria.
Thank you, Councilman Berlin. Did you have a question? Councilman?
Yeah, no, more of a comment. I'm excited to hear you say that, mainly because unlike other cities, we have a pretty substantial financial cliff that's coming in the next 10 years, maybe sooner, hopefully not, that we can't, what did you call it? Economic intensify our way out of. And so we're going to need to annex. And so we're going to need your help and support to figure out how to do that. Because 7 square miles, you can't really build out of 7 square miles that's fully built, unlike some of the other cities that can make use of that warehouse and things like that they actually have that we don't have. So we're going to need help and support figuring out how to do it. We haven't done that annexation process before, especially with areas, since Placer County's built out pretty much all of our city limits. So we're gonna have to figure out how that's gonna work. So we really are gonna need to partner together to figure out how we can get enough space that we can grow enough that we're going to be able to sustain ourselves as a city. And I'm glad that that's going to be a partnership and not a disagreement or a problem. So thanks for that.
And I'm also going to challenge you to think, don't limit yourself with what your current footprint can do.
Oh, no, we're going to
Yeah.
maximize that. It's just
Yeah.
not going to dig us out of this hole. The hole's a little too big.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't underestimate what you could do. And I say that because Milwaukee County was, the city where I worked was 98.6% built out.
We're
And
like
they did
99.
economic, and they did, it was 98.6. We knew the data. And
Were they 7 miles?
they were smallish cities. So they were a 48,000 population city.
Okay.
Landlocked entirely. But what they started doing was digging in. They were fortunate because one of the universities relocated their engineering department out there. I don't think that they realize what you can do with an engineering department when you're in economic development. They put them out there on a piece of land, and we started recruiting engineering businesses to it. We started getting in companies from all around the world into that area. So in a very small footprint, we started putting up buildings that were going like 6 and 8 stories tall. So that way you could start to leverage things there. And we got a lot of economic development done just through that. So never underestimate the power of what you can do within your own footprint.
I know our community, they're not going to be good with 8-story tall buildings in the middle of
No,
Auburn, but
and I wouldn't say that
appreciate your
here.
sentiment,
Yeah.
But we're still going to need to help on annexation. So
Yep.
thank you.
So, yeah, my question is, I'm excited about the film office. I didn't know about that. That's really good. What is FAM tours? I don't know what that means.
Yeah, so those are familiarization tours, and those are things that you would do in the film industry. But even more importantly, those are things that we do in economic development as well. So coming up next week, in fact, the Greater Sacramento Economic Council, we're a member of them. They are bringing in site selectors from around the United States, and we get to show them, we get to show off the Sacramento area. And so some Placer economic development people will be going and talking about our area as well. So that way we can get more investment in. So it's short for familiarization tours. So you do it in the film industry to get the industry professionals to come. Same thing with economic development. So we're excited about it on both fronts.
Fantastic. That's great. And you are aware that we had John Travolta a movie here. What's the name of that movie? Phenomenon.
In elementary.
Years ago. But anyway, that's our claim to fame, Lowertown. So, the other thing is, does your office have money that you can spend? Or is it mainly, that you have an opportunity to spend a budget that's just from your office, you in particular?
For any particular topic, or what are you thinking?
Or just for, if you see a need in a city, or if there's an opportunity to help out a city for marketing or that kind of thing.
Yeah, no. But the nice thing about working at the county is they have a process where we can ask for budget amendments on a quarterly basis. When I worked in a city, we could only do that once. So that was my experience with that. So I can do it quarterly here. The other thing is I know that the county executive office has some funding in certain places. And so if you know where to look and who to ask, and luckily right now I report, well, they just put in a new deputy CEO. So I report to a deputy CEO, but I also stay in very close contact and meet regularly with the acting CEO. So if there were funds needed, we would have access to something important. If by chance you knew of something that was coming up, I would recommend having those conversations sooner rather than later, because we're already going into budget meetings, I kid you not, to plan for the 23-24 budget.
Okay. Maybe the Veterans Parade. I'm just joking. But I am seriously, though, very, very happy that we work together, and such an important area that we have to focus on. I know our Economic Development Commission here is working very hard at branding, and we're trying to market Auburn. So with your input and help, I think we can really work together and move forward. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Anyone from the public have any public questions? Well, thank you very much for coming, taking the time.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, so the next we will have another report on PCTPA, the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan, the RTP development process, and annual unmet transit needs assessment process.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members, Mental Dean Public Works Manager. As part of our efforts through our transportation program, we collaborate with the folks from PCTPA. Annually, we do an unmet transit need workshop to try to figure out where we're going wrong, where we're getting things right, and then lay out the plan for the next few years. Tonight, I'd like to introduce Mike Costa and Corey Peterson. They're from PCTPA. They're going to give us a plan as to how we're going to proceed with those two processes for the next upcoming years.
Thank you very much, Menjel, and good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm Mike Costa with Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, and I'm joined here, of course, with Corey Peterson, my colleague. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. We're really excited to come here and present two of our big processes, as Menjel had mentioned, that we work on throughout the year. And this is something that we are very engaged with your public works staff and other staff members here at Auburn and throughout all of our jurisdictions on. So who are we? We are Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. We are the regional transportation planning authority for all of Placer County. So we work with your jurisdiction, all of the other cities and town of Loomis and the county to program and fund our transportation investments. And those could be multimodal investments in transit, roadway projects, bike and pedestrian projects, highway infrastructure projects, all kinds of multimodal projects that we look out 20 plus years to plan for. What we do, one of our major processes is known as the Regional Transportation Plan, which is done every 5 years. And we actually coordinate that effort with the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, who you received a presentation on their blueprint efforts back in September. We work very closely in that process because a lot of our planning efforts are aligned with theirs. However, I would argue that we are the boots to the ground, your local representatives. We help coordinate those projects that go into the Regional Transportation Plan and then the blueprint. So we work very closely with your jurisdictions to make sure that Placer County is represented very well in the 6-county plan that SACOG puts together. And this plan, this Regional Transportation Plan, it does establish all of the policies, goals, and objectives that we have as a region, as well as making sure that your local projects are in that plan, because that plan is used to then secure federal and state dollars for your projects. So if they're not in the plan, it's harder to get those projects funded. As I mentioned earlier, this project is very closely tied to SACOG's blueprint efforts. The one thing, however, to note is that our plan, the Regional Transportation Plan, does not really look at land use. First off, land use is something that is completely locally controlled at your level, at the city level. However, in SACOG's process of the blueprint, they look at land use forecasting, and that's required because of certain state regulations, mainly under some certain climate action bills like Senate Bill 375, which establishes the Sustainable Community Strategy. We don't have to do that, but SACOG does for the 6-county region. And then also SACOG, as a metropolitan planning organization for this whole region, they have to do some further efforts to demonstrate air quality conformity pursuant to federal and state regulations. So our RTP goes into their process, but they do a lot of that work for us. And then the other thing too is their blueprint effort, as you learned in September, is for the whole 6-county region. Our Regional Transportation Plan just looks at this county level, Placer County. So all of our plans do, though, contain the long-range investments for transportation. They contain the population forecast, the financial revenue forecast, because all of our plans have to be financially constrained as well. So the project list that you'll see in our Regional Transportation Plan essentially gets adopted by our board and then handed over into the SACOG blueprint process. So our projects are their projects as well. We have a lot of growth coming up, especially in Placer County. We're one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing county in the 6-county SACOG region, looking at a population of over 500,000, well, probably before 2050, and looking at some significant job growth as well as new home growth. But in the previous Regional Transportation Plan, we had approximately 33% of our population that commuted into Sacramento or out of our region for jobs. However, COVID has changed all of that. And so this new transportation plan that we're looking at will examine what does that look like now. Is it still 33% that's commuting out of our county, or are the jobs staying within our county? Or are we attracting more businesses into our region because we are so fast growing compared to the rest of SACOG? In our last plan, we looked at a variety, as I mentioned, multimodal investments, looking at public transit, roadway network infrastructure projects, maintenance projects, road expansion projects, and then just general planning efforts. On average, a lot of our projects are focused on roadway maintenance, repair, and expansion. And so that is something that, you know, we recognize that there may be some opportunities to look at other alternative transportation investments, such as more bike and pedestrian investments, and also even possibly more public transit investments moving forward in the next plan. However, this is again a snapshot of our $6.9 billion that we programmed in the last plan. Locally here in the city of Auburn, looking at some local projects that were completed, the Nevada Street Sidewalks project, actually over near where our offices are located near the Nevada Street Station, is a project that was completed and identified in previous planning efforts. And then of course, the Highway 49 sidewalk gap closure project, which is an effort coordinated between our agency, Caltrans, the county, and city of Auburn, is something that was also a major planning effort in previous transportation plans. As I mentioned, a lot of the work that we do is coordinating closely with your local jurisdiction to develop our project list. So we cannot build our projects without the help of people like Menjel and other members of your staff that put together your capital improvement programs, identify your general plan needs, and we then identify how we can put them and incorporate into our investment strategy in the regional transportation plan. Your projects are essentially informed by your staff. All of the information regarding costs, that sort of thing is estimated by your staff. And then we also help those projects align with some of the regional, state, and federal goals that we have to achieve as part of our plan. In terms of new revenue assumptions, some of you may have heard about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA, bill that was passed last year in 2021 that essentially introduces a new amount of funding available for us to consider for our transportation investments throughout the whole county. We don't exactly know yet. Some of those programs are still being developed individually, but we are looking at some increased anticipated revenues that could help with roadway projects, that can help with multimodal projects and other investments in this region. So this new plan that we're developing will be looking at how IIJA, how the programs and funding available can be utilized in our region. And then the other thing too that our plan will be looking at is a potential sales tax measure down in South Placer County for Lincoln, Roseville, and Rockland area. The other goals and consideration things that we have to consider in this plan versus previous plans is the climate action plan for transportation infrastructure. It's something that the state passed in 2021. Essentially, we have to examine our projects under the lens of CAPTI to ensure that our plans and our investments are meeting some of the state funding strategies in many of the different state programs that our agencies apply funding for. We look at Senate Bill 743, which looks at how our plans conform with the vehicle miles traveled analysis that has to be done on all of your transportation projects. And then we also have to look at some of the greenhouse gas reduction target goals of our region per the state of California, and looking at some of their new equity and environmental justice. So all of that is something our plan has to examine as we're looking at our investments. What we're doing now and why I'm here tonight is, of course, bringing awareness of our efforts, and also to let you know that we are planning to do some more on the ground work for our regional transportation plan. That includes, of course, presenting to the councils, maybe doing some pop-up events. We're looking at possibly some local events here in Auburn, looking at conducting 3 virtual webinars in early December that will have more information available at our website on. And we encourage members of the public to be engaged in this process because, again, this is a plan for everyone. And then this is a little bit of our schedule. We started the process back in early 2022. We're doing a lot of extensive outreach between now and early 2023, where we can then develop our goals, strategies, and objectives for our plan. And then moving forward, we can start adopting elements of that plan and then going out to actually full adoption of the plan in late 2024. And that aligns again with the SACOG blueprint process. Very quickly, too, another process we're working on is the unmet transit needs assessment. As Menjel mentioned, we as the RTPA for Placer County are required to do an annual unmet transit needs assessment where we look at what are the transit needs here in Placer County. That's done because of how we administer certain state fundings under the Transportation Development Act. And under that act, we manage local transportation funds as well as state transit assistance funds that are generated from various sources coming into the state of California that we then program into transit and transportation projects for Placer County. STA funds go directly towards transit projects here in Placer County, like Auburn Transit or Roseville Transit or PCT, Placer County Transit. However, LTF, which is a local source of funds, can go into either street and roads projects or transit projects. It's intended for transit first, but if there are things like unmet transit needs, then those have to be considered before any of these funds can go into local streets and roads projects. That's why we actually have to go out every year and look at if there's any unmet transit needs, because a lot of our local jurisdictions, including Auburn, use some of the LTF for streets and roads purposes. Unmet transit needs have specific criteria that are adopted by our Placer County Transportation Planning Agency board. Essentially, it's an unmet need if there is no service in a certain area, or if it's a service that's required to be implemented because of Americans with Disability Act requirements. And then our board also adopts criteria for reasonable to meet that also has to be evaluated for determining unmet transit needs. And essentially, reasonable to meet is involving an unmet need that meets recovery or feasibility standards set by our board. It can be paid for with existing funds. It's broadly and strongly supported by the community, and it's consistent with our regional transportation plan and all of our other subsequent short-range transit plans applicable to the jurisdictions where those needs may be. So we have to look at all of this criteria. We can't just say something's unmet transit need without looking at the reasonable to meet criteria as well that's adopted by our board. Previous unmet transit needs, again, are shown on this slide. None of them necessarily in the Auburn area, but the closest one that we had to Auburn dealt back in 2019 with a Rockland-Lincoln kind of jurisdictional cross ADA service. And so we continue to look at unmet transit needs. We don't have a lot of them that meet our criteria. And we also, though, do work with our transit partners to where even if we don't have an unmet transit need, we work with our transit partners to identify operational issues that may be addressed by the actual agency instead of our agency as an unmet transit need. So that's always an ongoing process as well. A little bit about our schedule for unmet transit needs is we are doing our outreach right now on a survey for the public that's available live until November 18th at that link that's shown on the slide. We're going to be analyzing our unmet transit needs as potential unmet transit needs and reasonable to meet starting in late November through January. And then we're going to adopt the findings of what we may see as an unmet need that's reasonable to meet in February at our board. And then if there are any unmet transit needs that we find that are reasonable to meet, those have to be addressed before we can allocate funding LTF towards local streets and road purposes. How can you provide comments on the unmet transit needs process? Of course, you can provide comments tonight. You can email me, you can call me, and you can also take our survey. We prefer the survey option because it's the cleanest way and it's simple. If you go to pctpa.net/UTN, that's a way you can provide your comments about any potential unmet transit needs here in Auburn or in the region. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you again for having me this evening, and I wish you all a good evening.
Thank you very much. And do I have any questions from the council? Councilman Spokely.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mike, fantastic presentation. Thank you very much. Menjel, thanks for bringing this forward to us. I guess the one question, as you're aware, SACOG's entertaining a 2-year extension for their MTP-SES or the blueprint update. Is that going to coincide with your planned update as well?
So yeah, thank you for that, council member. We actually are aware of that process and we've been coordinating with SACOG. The good thing about our effort is SACOG is required to update their plan every 4 years. We're required to update every 5 years. And there's typically a grace period. Even if we can't meet our update target, we have about a year after that. And so in talking to our partners at SACOG, it looks like even with their extension, we'll still be within at least a grace period to adopt our plan if we have to postpone our efforts for our regional transportation plan.
Great. Thank you very much. A wonderful presentation, great overview of all the things that you guys are working on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councilman Berlin.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, as well. Appreciate the presentation. I was curious how the city short-range transit plan nests into this longer-term plan that you're.
So that's a very good question. So the last short-range transit plan was actually adopted in 2019. So it was pre-COVID pandemic planning. And of course, as many of you know, the pandemic has had a significant impact on public transportation and transit services throughout the entire country. So our efforts, we are looking at that in terms of how does public transit look in the future. It's not quite addressed at a micro level in the regional transportation plan. We still identify categories for supporting transit, like transit operation categories that are grouped in a group listing, or transit capital categories that are grouped in a group listing in our regional transportation plan. But then really the update and the more on the ground work for what does transit look like in the future will be done and conducted through another effort that PCTPA is doing that I didn't talk about. And that is updating all of our short range transit plans to account for the disruptions from the COVID-19 pandemic starting this year. So we're actually going to be engaging in that effort. And we've already started talking with our transit partners and talking with our board about hopefully by the end of this fiscal year, we'll have a consultant on board and we'll be beginning the efforts of actually creating new short range transit plans that are comprehensive in nature, looking at our entire region as one system operated by 3 operators versus 3 separate plans. So it's an effort we haven't quite done in the past where we're really consolidating our efforts to look at how can public transit work in South Placer County as a whole and be operated by the different operators. And that effort, again, is starting this fiscal year, hopefully in springtime.
All right, thank you for that. On your slide where you talked about the expenditures, you had specifically referenced the biking and walking. And I'm curious, is that 3% typically biking and walk, like actual capital improvements, or would that include planning efforts? Because one of the discussions we've been having is just putting together a plan so that we know where we can find targets of opportunity. So curious, is that funding specific to capital, or is planning a component of that as well?
It's more specific to the capital and investment in the infrastructure for bike and ped. There was a carve out of about 9% for planning efforts in the whole plan, and that is more tied to the bike and ped planning. But we do both. We do consider efforts for both, and we do work with the partners to identify those projects.
Okay, great. Angel, my next 2 questions are probably best for you. Just curious if you have any idea, we've had conversations over the years about our unmet needs. And if I'm not mistaken, we've really focused in on our fare box return and our challenges there. With some of the changes that you've made in the transit program, especially with the on-demand, do you have any idea for us of, will our fare box return be where it needs to be, or do you think that's going to be an unmet need?
So I think they're 2 separate things. The unmet needs are going to look at the needs from the passenger side of things. Our fare box revenue ratio is going to be based off of our operational cost and how much money we're actually bringing back in. I would say that the city's in a good position with the on-demand program. We're seeing an influx of fares coming in. So we're actually kind of right where we need to be at the 10% mark. With that in mind, I know SACOG is possibly looking at reclassifying how Auburn is being looked at. Right now, we're in the rural district. They're planning on putting us, there's talk, I should say, of us going to a more urban region because of the growth that we've seen recently. But still at that point, I think we'll be able to meet our 15% or 10% on fare box revenue ratio.
I'm just making the assumption by potentially being reclassified as an urban area, that ratio goes up.
We would be required to bring in more funds. That's still in the early stages. It's just something that the conversation that's being had because of the amount of people that are within the region. I'm going to fight very hard to ensure that we remain rural because that keeps us at that 10%. That's not to say that we won't be able to make that revenue ratio regardless, but the idea is that we want to keep it rural because then we receive a separate set of federal funds compared to what we would get if we went into an urban setting.
So I'm probably going down the weeds since you mentioned this.
Sure.
Obviously, the growth is regionally, not really within the city limits and within our transit operating area. So is that taken into consideration?
Absolutely. And that's going to be my argument. Auburn remains the same.
Yeah. Okay. My last question is the projects that are being discussed that would go into this. Do you have a plan or an idea of how you'll be developing Auburn's plans, Auburn's projects that would be submitted into this plan?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you can see, the way Mike laid it out, it shows what funds can be used for what. We already know there's going to be some bike ped monies that we're going to put into sidewalks and bicycle lanes and things like that. So if the council recalls, last year, we didn't actually take those bike ped funds because it wasn't enough to put together a significant enough project. But as we bank it with PCTPA, we then draw down on it over a period of time. And then we have a larger sum of money without any, effect of losing any of it. They just keep it for us. And then we can do a larger project. With the mayor suggesting that we look at bike lanes and things like that on us, knowing that we need to address some of the curb ramp issues on High Street, that's what those funds are going to be used for. The local transportation funds, as Mike mentioned, have to fund transit first. Once we know we have transit fully funded, then the additional funds can go into the roadway projects, and that's generally where staff tends to put those funds.
Let me refine a little bit further. Thank you for that, though. Will we see and the community see the list of projects that you are proposing?
Yes, absolutely. We're working on putting together we've got the first 5 years planned, as we brought to you guys the other council meeting, but we're looking at a larger picture, like what is it going to look like for the next 25 years? Because this plan is to go out to 2050. So we're going to put that together, and then the council is going to see it before it goes to them. You make the decision and say, these are the projects we support.
If I can, I just have one comment. I think I would just add, and for our planning purposes, and I don't know what my colleagues think, but I really think we should hold some workshops ourselves to solicit input. We've had some speakers come and talk about some of the ADA issues, some of the need for additional biking, and that, there's probably a whole host of, potential topics that this plan could cover, different projects that would be under this plan. And so while I know you have a good list and it's a strong list, I think we should hold some type of workshop as well to make sure that we're asking our community of good projects that maybe, all respectfully, we haven't all thought of. But I appreciate that very much, man.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, Councilman Riddell Harris.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I guess my first question, since I do EV stuff in my day job, I didn't see a lot of mention of EVs, but with the governor's plans and also with the clean fleets regulations that are going into play and all the other fun things CARB is doing, that definitely has to be part of the plan. How does that fit in?
That is correct. And I appreciate you mentioning EVs. We are looking at all of our projects, as I mentioned, through the lens of CAPTI, which is that climate action investment plan, essentially, that was adopted in 2021. A lot of that has focus on alternative forms of energy and transportation, like EV or hydrogen fuel cell powered facilities, charging facilities, infrastructure, and that sort of thing. So we are looking at kind of all of our projects with that lens. If there's opportunities to feasibly incorporate things like EV charging facilities or other alternative forms of charging and transportation into those projects, that's all something that this plan will be looking at that's a little different from the last plan.
Okay, great. I think the last time PCTPA was in here, they talked about safe routes to school. And part of the disturbing part is they showed a bike lane on 49 and acted like that was part of a safe route to school. Not that I don't enjoy it. I wouldn't enjoy riding along 49 where it's not exactly safe, or having my middle schooler go down it. Is there any effort to not necessarily just add a bike lane to a road, but think about what an actual safe route to school might be? And maybe it isn't along, the major highway or something like that to actually get kids a safe route to school?
Go ahead.
I was going to
Either one,
say,
it doesn't matter.
yeah, we work a lot with our local partners on kind of identifying those routes. Menjel may have some additional criteria at which Auburn looks at its safe routes to school, because we don't necessarily choose those projects. It's more built from the ground up, and we
But
identify.
you have logic and you've seen 49.
Yeah, and I think
Sorry.
one of the and that's a very good comment. I think one of the challenges, I think, too, is right-of-way issues and identifying opportunities where we can still incorporate alternative forms of transportation to the best of our ability, given some of the constraints that happen. And especially on Highway 49, some of the challenges, of course, are cross-jurisdictional and within Caltrans's purview that we have no control over as well on how they develop their projects. So that's the challenge that we face. But it is something, yes, that we look at in terms of opportunities to separate bike paths, especially from heavily trafficked areas where we can, and we work with our partners to try to do that.
And I think Menjel, we were talking about Auburn Folsom last time, but I think that might be, Auburn Folsom isn't exactly a place I want my kid riding the bike either. So maybe it is a separate route.
And to your point, that's exactly it. So ultimately, where the bike lanes ends up is on the jurisdiction. So we can have a say what happens within the city limits. To Mike's point, we can't really dictate what Caltrans decides to do on their portion or Placer County does in their portion. Although I know the conversation is being had that we don't put it in places where it's dangerous.
Or, there was also talk about, maybe put a concrete divider, something to make it not quite so bad.
And there's opportunities to approach it from that aspect as well.
Okay, thank you. The last question I had, having to do with unmet transit needs. Our local elementary school district just discontinued busing. And so there is an unmet transit need, especially for the middle schoolers to be able to get to a school in Auburn, but most of them come from unincorporated Placer County, or a good chunk of them do. So how does it work when it's between the county? I mean, right now I know we're doing our on demand and we're going into unincorporated Placer County because that isn't that's an unmet need that we're finding, that people are calling us and asking us to take them to their doctor's appointment in unincorporated Placer County. But how do we work with them to make sure that we're meeting the unmet need together? Because our city is only 7 square miles and most of the time they're not trying to stay within the city.
Right, and that's an excellent question. And it should be noted that part of the unmet transit need process is not just identifying the need, is also to establish if the need is reasonable to be met. So while we can help 4, 5, 6, maybe 10 kids, it's maybe unreasonable for the city of Auburn to take on busing 200 kids to school, because we don't necessarily have the support staff to support that, the buses to support that, or.
And the school system is saying it's not funded by the state, so we don't need to do it. And really the local public transportation should be handling it. And
right. So, and that's the thing, and that's the process. So now when we come up with, let's say this is identified as a need, we sit down through our local partners and we say, how can we meet it? And is there a reasonable way that which we can meet it? Because as Mike pointed out, this is going to be the first time that we're actually doing it collaboratively between the 3 agencies. And I think there's the best opportunity to make something happen there, although we still have to keep in mind that we do have our own operational goals between the 3 agencies. So.
But yeah, so when stuff like that happens, it'd be interesting to get a better understanding of how you guys work together, and that you're actually looking at that specific need and not generally talking about unmet needs. But if there's a specific need that hundreds of kids have, that need is getting sorted out itself, and not talking about, oh, well, we're just going to run a bus at 10 o'clock a.m. Well, that doesn't help anybody.
Right. So this process is going to be very unique, because this is the first time we're dealing with this amount of kids.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to be also the first time that we're dealing it regionally.
Yeah.
So there's going to be conversations to be had, because I guarantee you, like you're thinking about it, every other parent that's out of a bus right now is thinking about the same thing. So I guarantee you we'll see that, and then we'll have to come up with a solution. And
even if we wanted buses, we can't even get a bus driver to take anyone on a field trip right now. So we couldn't even have them if we wanted them.
there's
That's an unmet need that needs to get figured out as well.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And to piggyback on your conversation about the safe route to school. Yeah, I do think it's important that, we do have, if we have bike lanes, we do need to make them safe and have dividers in some fashion, whether it be what are those called? The eyelets, or
Yeah. So
full on concrete. And I think that's something that we can do within our jurisdiction to get our kids safely to school, because a lot of kids do bike and walk to school. And if they go along 49, it's just an easy fix to have it go up to Evie Kane, at the very least.
yeah, absolutely. And please keep in mind that there's varying types of bike lanes. I mean, there's different classes, right?
Yeah.
And each class has its own set of requirements, depending on how fast the traffic is going to be adjacent to where the bike lane is going to be. You may need to have a divider, or you may need to have wider width. And that's something that we're going to look at. We'd never put out a bike lane and create an unsafe situation.
Right.
We hope.
Well, I'm talking particularly about
Right.
the Caltrans project.
Right.
So, and I do agree with Councilman Berlant that Menjel, your list is very important. And so we need input from the council and the community to help you come up with a very important list to go toward our region. And then my other question is, 22% of our expenditure is public transit. So is that involve rails then?
So yes, that includes rail and public transit in the form of bus systems. Yes.
Okay, so then for expansion for the rails up to Auburn from Roseville, that's all in consideration, because that's important, I think, for our community, is to be able to have rail transit down to Sacramento or the South County. And then the biking and walking and the planning, I just can't emphasize, the planning is great, but if you don't put in safe bike lanes, category 1, 2, or 3, whatever they are, they really will not ever be used. And so you might as well not spend the money. anyway, that's just my input, but I do appreciate your, what you do, and I appreciate the plan and in the future that we're looking into the future, and we're in good hands with Menjel, I know. So thank you very much. And anybody in the public want to add anything to, or have any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we go to the city manager report.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, just a couple of things just to follow up on them. Right now, already in the mill is our city engineer is working on a proposal regarding our circulation element that's going to include an active transportation program, which devolves down into a bike and pedestrian master plan that does exactly what you're talking about, and it establishes the safe routes to school plan. And ultimately, what will happen is part of especially the production of the bike and pedestrian master plan, because that goes into the capital improvement program that identifies the projects down the road. Those absolutely involve community workshops on things.
John, on that, are they looking at like side streets and back roads and things, or are they just looking at how they would go along Auburn Folsom? Because I mean, there are lots of ways of getting to different places using side streets, and those might be safer than getting on really fast roads like that.
It does. The best bike and pedestrian plans start with the local street, goes into the collector streets, and then goes on to the arterials. And you're right, the arterials, especially in many circumstances, become very difficult. It's actually easier to do some bike routes through the local and the collector streets, especially when you're looking at safe routes to school. Because I don't know a single parent out there that's going to put their kid out on Highway 49 or even Auburn Folsom Road to ride their bike to school. So they're good plans. There's a process for it, and it's currently in the works. We are working up a proposal from a very well-known traffic engineering firm to help put all that together. So stay tuned on that. Just one plug tonight. Tomorrow night, we've got Old Town in the house. On Wednesday, we're going to have Downtown. We are narrowing the scope on the subcommittee recommendations regarding projects for the ARPA monies that'll go into downtown and Old Town. Last week, we had our walking meetings, pretty well attended. I can't tell you, we've just pushed out today. We've got our, for those that have been actively participating, or even if they haven't been actively participating, if they're on our email distribution, the Survey Monkeys went out today. The Survey Monkeys are out on our social media for everybody to participate. Tomorrow and Wednesday are going to be very interactive sessions because the goal is that we're going to walk out of the meeting tomorrow night and on Wednesday night with the preliminary recommendations. We are bringing them to the City Council on November 14th. As far as narrowing the scopes of some of the projects that we're doing. So there have been some great ideas as we walked around last week. There were some really good ones, and I've been following up literally all weekend to get people to come out. So it'll be before the council on November 14th. And that's my report.
Thank you very much. City Council reports. Councilman Spokely?
Let's see, last week we did have a SACOG board meeting, talked about that extension again to the MTPSCS or blueprint update process. Spent a lot of time on the race equity plan that the SACOG board adopted at that last meeting. Interesting plan. If anybody wants to see it, let me know and I'll send it to them. Very
How many pages?
voluminous. It's a big report. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Councilman Berlant?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple items from me. The last week, the Placer County Air Pollution Control District met in a couple items that were on our agenda. We extended our employment with our executive officer, Eric White. So we extended him another 5 years unanimously. We approved the expenditures of some mitigation funds to replace two waste trucks at the city of Roseville. They were not that old, only about 6 or 7 years old, but they met all the criteria. And so I am constantly waving our hand about, what about us? We don't have a lot of garbage trucks, but I think we have some other items, but that was on our agenda. The Greater Auburn Area Fire Safe Council met. They, of course, are gearing up to be in front of us, I believe, at our first week of November, first meeting of November, which is the second week. But one thing I wanted to just put on everybody's radar is the council approved a special project that will likely potentially maybe be at the fairgrounds to essentially do kind of a retrofitting cleanup effort there. So I believe, John, if I'm not mistaken, you are on the subcommittee with some others. So look for more on that in the near future. And then the Auburn Chamber of Commerce, Government Affairs and Economic Development Committee met last week. No, 2 weeks. I'm a little behind. And we received the same presentation from Gloria. And I think overall, her commitment to Auburn and all the cities was good. And as I told her then, and she's not here anymore, but actions speak louder than words. And so we're going to hold her to all those wonderful ideas. And I know that Jonathan and she have already been working together. So with that, that's the end of my report.
Great, thank you. Councilwoman Riddell Harris.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Although I didn't attend because I was in the parking lot, the Economic Development Commission met and we did get responses for our marketing RFP or RFQ. We're going to be interviewing 3 consultants on Thursday and then selecting the one that is the best. And then we'll start moving forward with that process with them. So that's exciting.
Great, thank you very much. Downtown Business Association, Daffodil Planning. That's coming along. They're going to do that. We're hoping November. And if anybody wants to contribute money, they would really appreciate it. There's going to be some seed money there that DBA is going to give, I think $400. But it's going to be really neat. All around town, you'll see daffodils. There's going to be the Christmas tree lighting. Don't forget that, November 28th. And that'll be downtown. So be sure to be there. Trick or treat for the kids is the Friday before Thanksgiving. Be there.
Right,
Halloween. And then the light parade, December 3rd. So that's a lot going on for downtown. And then the School Park Preserve had a meeting and we discussed the vandalism and different ways. Menjel was there to help us try and brainstorm ways that we can deter that from going on. And we also discussed possibly putting some pickleball courts down at the old playground at where the asphalt is. So we're looking into that. Pickleball is very popular sport now. And we think that maybe that'll stimulate a lot of people coming in and hopefully maybe keep all the vandalism away. So looking into those possibilities, then I want to remind everybody to help with the senior center. They will not make it unless we all help and go to their fundraiser. That's November 3rd, Thursday night, 5:30 to 7:30, $25. It's right at the Veterans Hall. So it should be a good time though. It's very important event in the senior center. A lot of people go there. I mean, they really have a group of people that rely on that center. And then finally, I did get I received a letter from the Pioneer Joint Powers Agreement. They are allowing the addition of the city of Grass Valley and Nevada City as voting members. So I guess Alice, she will be, Councilwoman Dowden Cavill will be hopefully at the meeting on November 17th. So that was just an alert. And that's all I have. If anybody has anything else.
I'll just say on the Pioneer part that the more cities that we have, the better the economics are. So adding more cities and counties just helps us to get lower rates. So it's a good thing to be adding those folks.
Then hopefully she'll vote for it. Then with that, I will adjourn the meeting. Oh, and excuse me, I will not. We will I will adjourn the general session, but do I have
Yeah,
a
Madam
motion?
Mayor, I'll make a motion that we go to closed session.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we'll adjourn to closed session. In.
To tell you that, I'm going to lunch with Steve Rogers on Wednesday.